Deep thoughts.
Welcome everybody to CanHammer and Deep Thoughts. Disclaimer, these are my own thoughts. They're not the thoughts of anybody else necessarily in the CanHammer team. So today's episode is actually on Age of Sigmar and is inspired by a podcast I've been listening today, a podcast called Rolling Bad. It's a Age of Sigmar podcast based out of Albuquerque. The play is on Breaking Bad, Albuquerque, Rolling Bad. So it's an Age of Sigmar podcast. It's quite good. If you're into Age of Sigmar and you like listening to podcasts like I do, then check it out, Rolling Bad podcast. So what they were doing was taking people's thoughts on what changes they might like to see in General's Handbook 2. So as we know, GW is working on General's Handbook 2 right now. Amongst other things, they're adjusting some points for some of the compendium armies instead of just banning them. So that's gotten lots of people excited. You used to play with Tomb Kings and Fire Slayers and things like that. And I assume that there's going to be either FAQs with it or maybe some rules changes. So the question is, what kind of things might they change that people want to see? So they brought up they talked about a whole bunch of things, and I'm just going to talk about 3 things that were kind of interesting to me. First of all, the initiative roll-off. So coming from 40k, the possibility of somebody getting 2 turns in a row from just a random dice roll seems completely ridiculous. But actually, having played Sigmar now, I quite like that mechanic. For a few reasons. First of all, it makes you think about that possibility strategically in terms of how you move and plan your turn. Secondly, it can really swing the battle, and it's a double-edged sword. So if you're in front, that can really hammer it home for you. If you're behind, that can really swing the game for you. And even just in the 3 games I've played, those swings happen with the double turn. So the question is whether that should be changed, and I guess some people would just have very bad luck or just a bad run. They never win the initiative roll, so they never get the double turn. And so the question is, should it be changed? And one suggestion was maybe the person who loses the initiative roll will get a +1 the next time. And then should that just be a standalone +1 every time they don't win it, or cumulative? I don't know if either of that's an answer. At the end of the day, it's 50-50 chance. Whether you feel you're lucky or unlucky doesn't matter. Statistics are statistics, 50-50 chance. So should you modify 50-50 chance? I don't know. I guess I wouldn't be too unhappy with a static +1. I think I would be unhappy if by the end of the game somebody is stacked up so that I can't get that double turn I need to close the game out. So I think it does add a good element to the tactics of the game. So my thoughts are just to leave it as it is and don't mess with it. There was a lot of thoughts going on about adding things like lookout sirs or making cover a little bit more complex. And you know, the cool thing about Age of Sigmar is that it's not complex. The most complex part of Sigmar is figuring out what works well together and remembering how the rules interact. But even then, it's not like remembering how independent characters and chapter tactics go together, you know. So I feel like anything that adds complexity to AOS unnecessarily without obvious benefit to gameplay is a definite no-no. Anyway, that wasn't one of the points, but that just kind of popped up. The other point that people were talking about is the ability to shoot out of combat and into a combat. I guess initially people thought that some people think shooting is too powerful. You can ping somebody from 30 inches away. There's no modifiers to your hit roll, and there's usually no cover save or anything that takes into account maybe terrain or stuff in the way. Unless you're completely out of the line of sight, there's no help against that. And so, yeah. Again, that adds complexity though, and is it worth it or not? I don't know. Is shooting that powerful? Well, unless other than sort of bone splitters, arrow boy spam, You know, even against Chris's army, which has a lot of archery, I didn't find shooting too overly powerful. It's obviously powerful, but then you give up melee prowess for that. So, you know, it's a trade-off. So the question is, should you be able to shoot into and out of combat though? So, you know, if you allow people not to shoot when they're in combat, then you can very easily get cheap 80-point units that you just spam MSU style to tie up archer groups. And so that necessarily is not a great solution. You could have it so that you can't shoot anybody but the unit you're in combat with. You could make it they could shoot anybody, but there's modifiers to their to hit roll. I mean, they're getting attacked. They should have some kind of modifier to their ability to shoot a bow at somebody 30 inches away when they're being hacked by axes and maces. You know, that makes sense. Just a blanket modifier, -1 or something. I don't know. So that would be reasonable, I think. I think we should allow archers to continue to shoot because that's what they're there for. They're usually not that good in combat. And then it sort of decreases the sort of tie them down sort of spam strategy. Should you be able to shoot into a combat? I think yes. I don't see why you can't shoot at anybody you want. You know, it's war. There's going to be collateral damage. Maybe they could have something like in Batman miniatures game where you can shoot into a combat all you want, but if you miss, there's a chance that it damages your side. Or you just make it a minus modifier to hit because again, people are rolling around when you're in a combat. Can't really. It's hard to take aim. So there's a number of ways that you could make that more realistic, I guess. Again, adds a little bit of complexity, but I feel like just one flat modifier is not any more complexity than a rend or anything like that. So that's my thoughts on that. The final thing that they mentioned was revamping the way summoning works. So most people who can summon, so Death does a lot of summoning. I don't know a lot of other factions that can do a lot of summoning, mostly Death, but so the mechanic usually is that it's a spell. You pay a cost, so 9 or 10, or depending on how how powerful the thing you're summoning is usually, and then they can come in anywhere outside of 9 inches of the enemy. So in terms of setting people up for charges, it still is a 9-inch charge, so they can't move. I guess, and then people argue that people don't do a lot of summoning because anything you want to summon just takes out of your points pool and has to start off the board, and if you can't get it in, if it's like a Morgul and you need a 10 to summon it on a 2d6, chances are that thing's not coming in unless you have a lot of modifiers. And then you're down 400 points for a long time. But then when you do get it in, 9-inch charge is not too hard. Maybe it's a little bit too long. People are saying maybe you should be able to set them up 8 inches or 7 inches or just over halfway, so 8 inches, something like that. That might be reasonable to make summoning more of a thing. It definitely is still a powerful way of getting units further down the board if you're just trying to send them to objectives or something. Some people argued that you should be able to summon multiple times of the same unit, or that you should be able to have other wizards cast a spell when somebody else tried to cast it and failed, because right now you can only try and cast one spell one time. So I guess those are all possibilities. Again, sort of adding a little bit to the complexity. Currently I feel like the units I'd like to summon, so Morghasts, Morgul, to get them further ahead, although the Morgul is pretty fast, it moves 12 and it flies. A little bit too expensive to risk to a 2d6 roll, especially when I need like a 10 or more. I'm just going to start that thing on the table, So I just feel like summoning is not that powerful right now. I don't know if it needs to be tweaked or not, or it's just something that doesn't get used. I don't know. I've not watched enough games to know if it becomes a powerful thing. So yeah. the other thing about summoning, some people suggested, well, why don't we have it like 40k where you could summon whatever you want from a sideboard, or it just adds on points. And I really dislike the free points part of 40k. Now, this is coming from a Lions Bay player who gets 300 points of free transports. You know, to some extent, yeah, that's not fair. And then Demons takes it further. I mean, just for the sake of casting spells, which they can usually get off very reliably, they can add 1,000 points or more to their army. That's just extra. So whereas in Age of Sigmar you can't do that. You know, your 2,000 points, that includes everything you're gonna summon. So that certainly impacts. I mean, if demons had to fit everything, including what they summoned in 1850, I think they'd be a lot less powerful. So, you know, or if all your pinks and blues and brims all counted, like everything that it was going to split into, it'd be very different. So overall, I feel like probably the summoning mechanic, if you're going to change it, maybe either lower the costs or lower the distance you have to be away. You're going to make more incentive to summon. But other than that, I wouldn't really change it very much. So that's my deep thoughts for today. If you have any comments or to start some thoughts of your own, start a bit of a discussion, please leave them in the comments below. And thanks for watching. See you next time.